In a landmark decision that will echo through the halls of government for years to come, the Supreme Court has delivered a powerful and unprecedented check on presidential authority, directly addressing, for the first time in decades, the president's ability to impose sweeping tariffs under the justification of a national emergency. For decades, the executive branch has steadily accumulated more power, especially in the realms of international trade and national security, often acting swiftly in moments of crisis or uncertainty. This ruling draws a clear and unmistakable line. There are real limits to what a president can do alone, without the direct involvement and approval of Congress. The case at the heart of this decision, American Importers Association vs. United States, centered on the controversial Liberation Day tariffs, which sparked fierce debate across the nation. The court's 6-3 majority opinion makes it clear: economic competition, no matter how fierce or disruptive, isn't automatically a national emergency that justifies extraordinary executive action. This decision will have immediate and far-reaching consequences, impacting prices at home, business strategies across industries, and America's relationships with trading partners around the world. It forces a national conversation about what truly constitutes an emergency, and challenges Americans to reconsider the proper roles and responsibilities of each branch of government in times of crisis. The Supreme Court has now agreed with critics, finding that in this impactful instance, the executive branch overstepped its constitutional boundaries and acted without sufficient oversight. For the average American, the legal details may seem distant or abstract, but the effects will be felt directly in the prices we pay, the stability of our jobs, and in the enduring principle of checks and balances that underpins our democracy. The decision raises a fundamental question for our democracy. Who truly decides major economic policy, the president acting alone, or Congress as the voice of the people? With this ruling, the court has firmly pointed to Congress, reshaping the balance of American political power and setting a new precedent for the foreseeable future. To truly understand the Supreme Court's decision, we first need to examine the bold and controversial policy that set everything in motion. This policy, known as the Liberation Day tariffs, quickly became a lightning rod for debate across the nation. Announced on July 4, 2024, these steep tariffs targeted a wide range of goods imported from major Asian economies, sending shockwaves through global supply chains and international markets. Supporters, including many domestic manufacturers and labor unions, praised the move as a necessary step to protect American jobs and industries that had long struggled to compete with cheaper imports. For them, the tariffs represented a long overdue measure to level the playing field, boost local production, and restore economic pride. Some even believed the policy would spark a new era of American innovation and self-reliance, giving communities a much-needed sense of stability. The administration framed the policy as a matter of national security, arguing that economic independence was crucial for the country's safety and future, not just a tool for economic gain. But opponents, importers, retailers, tech companies, and farmers, warned that the tariffs would function as a massive tax, driving up costs for businesses and consumers alike. They feared the policy would disrupt supply chains, threaten jobs in other sectors, and ultimately hurt the very people it was meant to help. Critics argued that instead of liberation, the tariffs would bring economic chaos, uncertainty, and hardship for millions. At the heart of the controversy was the president's decision to impose these sweeping tariffs unilaterally, invoking emergency powers and bypassing Congress entirely. This unprecedented use of emergency authority for such a broad economic policy set the stage for a dramatic constitutional showdown. The tariffs quickly became more than just a trade dispute. They ignited a fierce debate over the limits of presidential power and the balance of authority in American government. With tensions rising and the nation divided, the Supreme Court's intervention was not just likely, it was inevitable. The Liberation Day tariffs relied on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, or IEEPA. IEEPA was designed for genuine crises, hostage situations, terrorism, not broad trade disputes. Critics argued Congress never intended IEEPA as a tool for setting trade policy, since the Constitution gives that power to Congress. By using IEEPA for tariffs, the president was seizing legislative powers. The administration countered that economic threats from abroad could be national security threats, justifying emergency action. But using IEEPA for sweeping tariffs was unprecedented, forcing the courts to confront the real limits of presidential emergency powers. The question: Can any economic challenge be declared a national emergency? The Supreme Court's ruling answered that question decisively. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that the president exceeded authority under IEPA. The court clarified, IEPA is for sudden extraordinary threats, not chronic policy problems like trade deficits. Ongoing economic issues are for Congress to address through legislation, not for the president to tackle with emergency powers. The majority warned that if any economic competition could be labeled an emergency, presidential power would become limitless. That would transfer Congress's constitutional authority over commerce to the White House. The court refused to endorse such a dramatic shift in government structure. Justice Kavanaugh's concurrence stressed, if Congress wants to give the president broad tariff powers, it must say so clearly. The ruling is a clear instruction. Future presidents face a much higher bar for using emergency powers in economic policy. The era of unilateral executive action on trade is over. The Supreme Court's landmark decision marks a pivotal shift, returning significant power to Congress and allowing it to reclaim its constitutional authority over trade policy. This move rebalances the separation of powers, ensuring that the legislative branch once again has a central role in shaping the nation's economic relationships with the world. For years, Congress watched its influence wane as presidents increasingly took the lead on trade, often acting unilaterally and sidelining lawmakers from crucial decisions that affect the entire country. Now, the court has handed the reins back, making it clear that this authority belongs to Congress. Lawmakers are reminded that they are the stewards of trade policy, responsible for representing the interests of the American people. Congress must now step up and take full responsibility for regulating foreign commerce. No longer can they simply criticize from the sidelines or defer tough choices to the executive branch. The president can no longer declare an economic emergency and impose tariffs alone, bypassing the legislative process and public debate. Instead, the White House must work directly with Congress, building coalitions, negotiating legislation, and seeking bipartisan support to enact meaningful trade policies. This process may be slower and more deliberative, but it is also more transparent, accountable, and ultimately more democratic, allowing for open debate and public input. Lawmakers must now develop deeper expertise, engage in rigorous research, and build bipartisan consensus on complex trade issues that impact jobs, industries, and consumers across the nation. If Congress fails to act or shirks its duty, voters will hold them accountable at the ballot box, demanding results and responsible governance. The decision ends the era of passing the buck to the White House, forcing lawmakers to own the outcomes of their trade decisions. Power is now more diffuse, requiring genuine cooperation and negotiation between the legislative and executive branches to achieve progress. While policymaking may slow down, the result will be a more stable, predictable, and balanced approach to trade, one that better reflects the will of the people and the checks and balances at the heart of American democracy. Striking down the Liberation Day tariffs brings immediate economic relief. Businesses relying on imports will see costs drop, especially in electronics, automotive, and retail. Financial markets rallied, viewing the decision as a win for stability and predictability. For consumers, the tariffs had acted as a hidden tax, raising prices on everyday goods. With tariffs gone, prices are expected to stabilize or even fall over time. However, domestic industries once shielded by tariffs now face renewed competition. Steel producers and manufacturers may see sales decline as cheaper imports return. These industries must now turn to Congress for support, not the White House. The stage is set for new debates over American industrial policy. The Supreme Court's ruling limits the president's power under IEPA, but doesn't leave the executive powerless. The president still has tools under other laws, like the Trade Act of 1974, which allows targeted action against unfair trade practices. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act lets the president impose tariffs if imports threaten national security, but future uses will face tougher legal scrutiny. The president's greatest tool remains negotiation, leading trade talks and agreements, though most require congressional approval. The ruling reinforces that major trade changes need Congress's partnership. The president also wields soft power through diplomacy and international summits. While executive orders and policy statements can shape global trade, they lack the force of tariffs. The Supreme Court's decision clarifies broad-based import taxes require congressional action. The president's role in trade is now more about persuasion and partnership. With power restored, Congress must now lead on trade policy. Lawmakers must legislate on current trade issues and oversee the president's remaining authorities. The era of deferring to the president is over. Congress is now the main forum for trade debates. Addressing unfair competition and manufacturing decline will require new laws and investments in competitiveness. Congress must also monitor how the president uses trade laws, holding hearings and clarifying limits as needed. This renewed role offers stability and accountability, grounding trade policy in democratic process. The court's decision reaffirms, for major issues like trade, democracy's deliberative process is essential. Beyond trade, the Supreme Court's decision is a powerful affirmation of checks and balances. The court didn't pick sides on trade policy, it reaffirmed that process matters as much as outcome. By narrowing what counts as a national emergency, the court checked the expansion of presidential power. This strengthens the rule of law, ensuring government is subject to law, not above it. Citizens and businesses gain stability, knowing major rules won't change overnight by executive decree. The case is about preserving American self-government and keeping Congress at the center of lawmaking. The separation of powers is the living heart of American liberty. By restoring Congress's role, the court delivered a victory for democracy itself.